Hi, good evening, and welcome to the Faye Kircher Public Speaking Contest Fall 2024 edition. I'm Dr. Stephen Melling, the Program Director for Oral Communication here at UMKC. Tonight we have some excellent speakers. We're very fortunate to hear 4 great speakers, and we'll hear their names in just a moment. The contest is named for Faye Kircher, a longtime educator here at UMKC. You can read more about her in your program, which is available through the QR code, which has a fun dinosaur in the middle, you might notice, right up there on the screen. So tonight, we'll be hearing from the 4 best students in Communication Studies 110, also known as Fundamentals of Effective Speaking and Listening. Let me tell you, right now, we have over 400 students in the class. So you can do the math and see that we're dealing with some really good speakers right now. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our judges now. So we got a great slate of judges. First up, we have Paul Hackenberger, who teaches for UMKC dual credit and is also the debate coach at Winnetonka High School. We have Elizabeth Montalongo, who is a program coordinator in the block school and a graduate of our program in communication and journalism. We have Dr. Ashley Rader, a professor of communication at Johnson County Community College. And we have Dr. Jennifer Morgan, a new faculty member in philosophy right here at UMKC. So tonight we have 4 contestants, and the top contestant tonight will earn a $300 one-time scholarship, and all runners-up will get a one-time $150 scholarship. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first contestant. So Isabella, could you come on up to the front? We first have Isabella Hadar Baumilker, a student of Dr. Linda Kerr's. Her speech is called At the Front of Sex Education in Missouri, Bridging the Gaps of Misinformation. She is a sophomore from St. Louis, Missouri, majoring in pre-dental hygiene and health sciences. We'll go ahead and get her mic'd up, and then we'll get started.
Don't have sex. You will get pregnant, and you will die. This is most famously quoted by physical education teacher Coach Carr in the 2004 movie Mean Girls. While this line seems a bit dramatic in the matter of movie magic, the tone of sex education curriculum in Missouri is eerily familiar. Sex education can empower young people to make healthy and happier choices within their adolescence. Therefore, the information that we receive at a young age can drastically impact our perspective on our own bodies, how the media polices our bodies, and feeling comfortable with discussing reproductive rights. While participating in Teens for Choice St. Louis, Missouri, a reproductive rights organization aimed towards St. Louis Metro High School students, I have fostered a close relationship with the STL reproductive rights community. As well as participating in the pro-choice Students at the Front for Sexual Education group, I believe that the importance of sex education starts young, and to ask for affirming education starts with political systems around you. Being a part of such groups contributes to my strong civic engagement. In fact, I have found that affirming and inclusive sex education should be required in all schools in Missouri because it improves media literacy, reduces the risk of STIs and unplanned pregnancies, and empowers young people to enforce enthusiastic consent. The World Wide Web can be an informational aid, but it can encourage fear-mongering surrounding sex education. Therefore, early improvement of media literacy will increase when sex education is required in Missouri schools. In a scientific article written by Gierzem Cardbolat, teaching adolescents the skills to critically analyze the media messages that they are exposed to could mitigate the media's influence on sexual socialization and prevent the internalization of inaccurate messages. Think about this. The media teenagers consume is more likely to be hypersexualized than the media targeted towards adults. For instance, frequent exposures to sex-based behavioral expectations can create a false notion of gender roles regarding sexuality. As young people are highly impressionable by what the media they consume is, adolescents accept what we see online because it seems accurate and representative of the real world. Cardbolat also mentions the super peer theory, which which states that the media acts as a super peer, as it exerts a powerful influence over adolescents than their own peers. Think about the media you consumed in middle school and high school. Are there instances where you can visualize a show being hypersexualized? While many people write this off as just being adolescent antics, the media is a powerful tool for socialization and influencing the attitudes surrounding sex. This is why it is extremely important for early media literacy training in academic settings. By giving students the tools to recognize hypersexualized advertising, unhealthy gender biases, and analyze these messages in the long run, we are making a change. Additionally, a 2014 journal article from the Journal of Media Literacy Education states, research has shown an increase in the efficacy of media literacy education on sexualized socialization when combined with sex education or health education classes, since the curricula acts as guides for what needs to be covered in the meeting. By implementing school-wide media literacy campaigns, students can build the critical media processing skills to use in future situations outside the classroom. By implementing comprehensive sexual education in the classroom, STIs and unplanned pregnancies are reduced. Missouri is near the top list for teen birth rates. In 2020, the CDC reported 18.8 births per 1,000 females aged 15 to 19 in Missouri during 2020. STD rates follow the same trend as teen pregnancies among youth in Missouri continue to rise. While 2020 was just 4 years ago, the attitudes surrounding contraception in Missouri are problematic. Because the state doesn't have legislation requiring sex education, districts have flexibility for what to teach. This flexibility can leave out comprehensive education and explanations of topics such as contraception, anatomy, and even how to put on a condom. Bria Ford, a former teen mom interviewed by Springfield News Leader, believed that the more information your kids have, the better decisions they can make for themselves. This is why it is pertinent to teach students about bodily autonomy, anatomy, and the proper medical terminology usage. Ford describes not knowing how to use a condom. "Nobody taught me how to use a condom," she said. "If you handed me a condom and we were in a sexual act, I wouldn't have known what to do with it at that point. Asking someone to put on a condom would have been even more intimidating, because how would I know he was putting it on right?" Misinformation kills. Missouri Personal Responsibility Education Program, also known as PrEP, provides sexual health education programs to students in hopes of reducing unexpected teen pregnancies. In a 2021 study analyzing the effectiveness of PrEP, Missouri PrEP saw improvements in knowledge, attitudes, and the intentions as a result of program implementation. Teen pregnancy interventions rely on theories of change to guide their curriculum. The intentions of the program focus on the engagement of sexual behavior and safe-sex practices. Theories of change state that knowledge, attitude, perceived behavior, and norms work together to shape intentions and behaviors. Intentions are important because they foreshadow future behaviors, and judgment is correlated with how well a person is able to adapt to a certain situation. By making these small changes to use a condom, while it may not be abstaining from sex overall, it is still a healthy and safe choice to make. Post-program intentions vary, and the increase in intentions to use a condom is larger than the change in intentions to engage in sexual behavior and abstain from sex. This is what we need to learn. We don't have to ignore sex and villainize it as a bad thing. We can say that there are things to watch out for, or things that people should know about. And by telling someone to run away from something, that's just going to make them want to go towards it more if they're not given the right media tools to learn how to work around it. Once youth are sexually active, the internal initiative to change their sexual behaviors is slow. Therefore, early education regarding pregnancy and STIs will instill healthy habits early on, decreasing the rates of teen pregnancy and STI contraction. Lastly, I was 18 when I learned that consent isn't just a yes. It depends on the environment, the relationship, and the age too. Enforcing enthusiastic consent starts with knowing what parameters consent is and is not. Dr. Jay Goodman, a PsychHive contributor, states that enthusiastic consent helps build a culture of respect and communication in relationships. Enthusiastic consent is a newer model for a positive expression of consent. This starts with looking for additional details that indicate a positive yes. Rather than sticking with a rigid yes or no, there are nuances in consent, such as asking permission before changing the degree of sexual activity, checking in with your partner, and letting your partner know they can stop at any time. Looking at the consent laws here in Missouri, consent is not specifically defined. The legislation is focused around if the person is incapacitated, lacks the capacity to consent, and forcible compulsion by substance. According to Rain, the definition of consent in Missouri does not require freely given consent or affirmative consent, like I have just highlighted above. In a Missouri State University master's student's thesis on the effect of sex education programs on rape culture, the study was to determine if prior sex education beliefs in rape myth acceptance, sexism, bystander behaviors, and the importance of consent would be improved through affirmative and inclusive sex education. The factors that create differences in student retention of consent information goes back to the sex education that they received in high school and middle school. When asked if they received information regarding affirmative consent, which is a part of comprehensive sex education, many participants cannot recollect if they had. This study states when participants underwent comprehensive sex education programs, they reported significantly lower rape myth acceptance, victim blaming, and lower benevolent and hostile sexism. Continuing to utilize outdated sex education programs cheats our children out of a beneficial and effective sex education program standard. When students are given the resources to recognize the dangerous effects of misinformation regarding nuanced consent, rape culture is uplifted more and more. So many different subjects to focus in on in school. Why sex education? Why should it be required? By instituting sex education as a required subject to teach, this will improve media literacy, reduce the risk of STIs and unplanned pregnancies, and empower young people to enforce enthusiastic consent. I want to leave you all with a quote in the book Openly Bob by Bob Smith. In America, when we decide to ignore a subject, our favorite form of denial is to teach it incompetently. Familiarity without true understanding is not only the basis of our families, but of our educational system as well. Mandatory sex education will give Missourians the toolbox to make safe, healthier, and happier reproductive choices.
Thank you so much, Isabella. So tonight, our next speaker will be Sarah Hanan. So we'll welcome Sarah Hanan up to the stage. She's a freshman from right here in Kansas City, majoring in communications with an emphasis in digital journalism and media.
At some point in each of our lives, we all threw screaming and crying tantrums, maybe in public. We all hit puberty, had our first crush, made mistakes, and most likely went through a tough experience, such as grieving the loss of a loved one. Now, imagine if all of these personal moments of yours were recorded by your parents and posted on the internet for the world to see. This is the reality of an increasing number of children with the rise of social media influencer families on platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. While for some, being able to have a glimpse into the daily lives of others may be entertaining, we need to take a step back and acknowledge what risks this is placing on the children featured in this content. That is why I believe that there should be protections implemented for the children in social media influencer families. Through a survey that I conducted with my Com 110 class, I found that while many people were not extremely familiar with this type of content, many people did acknowledge that there are risks that are in place when you post your child online for profit. Today, we will be discussing how children in influencer families suffer from a loss of privacy and an increased risk of exploitation, as well as regulatory laws and social media guidelines that can be implemented to ensure the protection of children online. Let's start by discussing the effects of being in an influencer family on a child. To begin, the loss of privacy and increased risk of exploitation are two major factors that go into posting children online. According to an article by Caroline Waldo in the University of Michigan Journal of Law Reform, child labor laws are outdated. There is the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which highlights child labor laws, as well as Coogan laws, which originated in California and are only applied in a few states, but they ensure that a percentage of a child performer's earnings will be left for them in a trust fund account in their name until they reach adulthood. While these laws are helpful for traditional child performers like child actors, this does not apply to social media influencers, as many of these laws were put in place before the rise of social media. In today's world, financial exploitation is a real concern, especially for social media influencers, as the parents are what determine everything about wages, whether they're easy to access and if there's any wages left for the child at all. Along with financial concerns, there come privacy risks with being a child being posted online. These risks can range from facial recognition and hacking to even pedophilia, according to Waldo. The digital footprint that is not consented to of these children is a major issue, and a study showed that by 2030, quote-unquote sharenting will play a role in 2/3 of identity fraud cases facing this generation, according to an article by Stephanie Tsai and Dorothy Hastings from PBS News. Many accounts post young children, and commonly young girls, and this is a problem as predators often target these accounts with comments, and parents can take action and block these accounts, but this only works to an extent, as social media platforms like Instagram limit a user's ability to use the block feature if it deems they've blocked too many accounts in a certain period of time. Predators can also create new accounts and save this content of the children being posted online. Now that we have an idea of the type of repercussions being posted as a child online can face, let's take a look at how this can be prevented. Regulatory laws and social media guidelines can be implemented to ensure the protection of children online. Existing laws, such as the previously discussed FLSA and Coogan laws, can be updated to include social media influencers. Along with this, the CRC, which is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, can be applied to social media. The CRC is described as the defining international regime for the human rights of children. And Article 16 of the CRC can be applied to the potentially sensitive or personal content that is often posted by parents of these children online. Article 16 states that children should not be subjected to interference with their privacy or attacks on their honor or reputation, according to Rachel Caitlin Abrams' article in the Chicago Journal of International Law. Articles such as Article 16 can help prevent the embarrassing and sensitive information that's posted online for the entertainment of others by the parents of these children. If legislation is not put into place, social media platforms can take things into their own hands and establish guidelines that require parents to submit proof of a trust fund account in a child's name before any content featuring that child is monetized, to ensure the compensation and financial protection of that child, according to Libby Morehouse in her University of Michigan Journal of Law Reform article. To sum up, let's review how child influencers are affected and some possible solutions. There is a major issue with children being posted online by their parents, and there should be protections implemented to ensure their protection online and in the real world. I urge you all to advocate for an increase and an update in regulations and legislation to ensure financial compensation for these children, as well as protection for them online and in the real world, as all children deserve to grow up with their personal moments kept personal, privacy, and protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Sarah was a student of Professor Cassie Farron And that is also true of our next contestant, Joseph Knowles, if you could come on up. Also a student of Professor Farron. So Joseph will be talking about white-collar crime punishment. He is a freshman majoring in criminal justice and criminology from right here in Kansas City. So we'll let him get situated, then we'll hear from Joseph.
I have no desire to live, no way to make an earning, and no way to pay the bills. This quote comes from a retiree who was affected by the Madoff scandal in 2008, perpetrated by Bernie Madoff, one of the most infamous white-collar criminals in American history. As a criminology major, white-collar crime has fascinated me for a long time. So much so that when I asked my classmates if they knew about white-collar crime, over 60% of them couldn't even give me a proper definition. And while that was fine, I was there to tell them that a white-collar crime is any nonviolent financial crime. But don't be wrong, while I use the term nonviolent, the effects of white-collar crime are extremely devastating. Last year alone, over $300 billion was lost in the American economy due to white-collar crime. The sad reality is that many of these criminals are barely punished, and if they are, these criminals are given extremely lenient punishments. Today, I will be showing you the consequences of white-collar crime. We will be discussing the lenient punishments that these criminals receive, and finally, I'll be telling you what you and I can do to make sure these criminals are justly punished. But first, let's look at the harm and the consequences of white-collar crime. We first must acknowledge that white-collar crime isn't just one crime, it's a spectrum of crimes. It's every nonviolent financial crime, so that can range from fraud to corporate crime, to tax evasion, to just scamming people online. National University outlines in their website in 2018 three main consequences of white-collar crime. The first is loss of public trust in public officials. This is because many known public officials have committed white-collar crime, and one even successfully ran for presidency in 2024. The second is an unfair market advantage. This is when corporations use crimes like fraud to get a leg up in a free market competition. The third is social inequality. White-collar crimes make the rich richer and the poor even more poor. So now that we understand the consequences of white-collar crime, let's go ahead and discuss the lenient punishments that these criminals receive. George Pierpoint is a writer from BBC News, and in their 2019 article, they look at two infamous cases of this happening. The first is Jack Abramoff, who in 2006 defrauded $45 million from Native American tribes across the United States. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and got out early on good behavior. None of those Native American tribes saw a cent of what was taken from them. Another good example is Jerome Kerviel, who in 2010 was a French banker, and at the bank he worked at, he conveniently lost 4.9 billion euros through unauthorized transactions into his account. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and over 2 billion euros have never been recovered. Matt's Brog expands on this in their 2023 article for Forensics College, where they look at Stuart Gulliver. Now, in 2012, Stuart Gulliver was the CEO of the 5th largest bank in the world, HSBC Bank. Also, in 2012, Stuart Gulliver was found guilty of laundering money for drug cartels and committing international financial crimes. When this all came out, he posted a public apology saying he was sorry and he wouldn't do it again. No one at HSBC Bank was sentenced, no one at HSBC Bank was fined, and Stuart Gulliver is still a free man today. So the question you should be asking is, why are these criminals getting such lenient punishments? Well, there are a variety of reasons, but Matt Sprague expands on it the best in that same 2023 article when he acknowledges that there is a wealth disparity between white-collar criminals and blue-collar criminals. White-collar criminals have wealthy backgrounds. They are highly educated, as most of them have a master's or a bachelor's in some sense, and they can afford high legal counsel as it helps them navigate the American justice system. White-collar criminals have an unfair advantage over blue-collar criminals in our own American justice system, and that has impacts, because the American justice system acts as a deterrent for crime. So, hypothetically, if I commit a bank robbery and get sentenced to 20 years in prison, you probably won't commit a bank robbery because you know the punishment could be up to 20 years in prison. What these criminals are seeing is they're seeing these other white-collar criminals commit these extravagant crimes and barely get sentenced for it whatsoever. The punishment does not fit the crime. The American justice system falters when it comes to deterring white-collar crime, and we've seen that. White-collar crime has been on the rise since 2015, and it doesn't look like it's going down. So now that we understand the lenient punishments that these criminals get and how that affects our own American justice system, let's look at what you and I can do about it. According to Congress.gov, our current president of the United States, Joe Biden, who was a senator at the time, proposed the White-Collar Crime Penalty Enhancement Act. He proposed this, and what this bill would do is it would increase the punishments of conspiracy to defraud the United States and mail and wire fraud. This essentially means it would increase the punishments of fraud, the most common white-collar crime in America. But the bill doesn't stop there. They also wanted to amend the Employment Retirement Security Act of 1974, protecting retirees to their own retirement. But again, the bill doesn't stop there. They also wanted to federally review the sentencing for the majority of white-collar crimes in America. Essentially, what this bill would do is it would increase the punishments of white-collar crime in America, acting as a proper deterrent. This bill was tabled in 2002, effectively killing it before it even began. So what can you and I do to make sure this bill gets back into Congress's docket? Well, there are three things we can do. The first is the most obvious, and it doesn't have a direct effect, but you can probably sign a petition online somewhere. And like I just stated, it won't have a direct effect to getting the bill back into Congress's docket. It has affected policymakers' decisions before. Think in 2015 when gay marriage rights was a heavily debated topic. The second thing you can do is you can write to your local legislatures. Legislators are voted in by the people, they work for the people from their district, and if enough people from their district write to them about this pressing issue, they will more likely vote on it because that is where the voters live. The third thing you can do is you can vote, but you can also research the politicians you vote for. Many politicians have their stances on their websites, and it's less than a 2-minute search to find their opinions on different controversial things like white-collar crime. Because if this bill eventually does get back into Congress's docket, it would act as a proper deterrent for it. Like I stated in my introduction, over $300 billion was lost in the American economy last year due to white-collar crime. That affects every single American in this room, whether they like it or not. The sad reality is it doesn't have to be that bad. White-collar crime can be deterred, it just isn't. Today, I've shown you the consequences of white-collar crime. We've discussed at length the lenient punishments that these criminals receive and how that affects our own justice system. And finally, I've shown you a piece of legislation that's over 20 years old, and I told you what you and I can do about it to make sure it gets back into Congress's docket. Because this isn't something that's going to happen by the end of this year. It probably won't happen within the next few years, but is there a harm for starting now? Tell me, if someone convicted of this crime can become president of the United States, don't you think that's a problem? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. So our final speaker for tonight is Lillian Lee. So we'll go ahead and Lillian is from St. Louis, and her speech is Why Students Should Sleep More. She's a first-year accounting major.
Hello, my name is Lillian Lee, and thank you so much for attending today. I will be discussing and telling you why students should sleep more. First, raise your hand if you have ever sacrificed your sleep in order to study or attend a social event, or even complete something that you have been putting off that day, a week before, or even the whole month. Now, raise your hand if you have ever driven the next day after that night of little sleep. Thank you. According to Connie Goldsman's book in 2021, Running on Empty, Sleeplessness in American Teens, she states how young adults need around 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. According to my data analysis, for college students, I saw that most college students only get around 5 to 6 hours of sleep every night. That is not nearly enough. Back in high school, in my junior and senior year, I had an average of around 4 hours of sleep. This was because I wanted to study or finish an assignment, just like college students here today. I saw personally how detrimental that was to my health, how detrimental that was to my ability to focus in class, stay engaged to my teacher's teaching. And so, with this speech, I hope to tell you why and how you should sleep by avoiding blue light, taking naps, and realizing what a better world you would be living in if you just got more sleep. That leads me to talk to you about how a lack of sleep leads to anxiety, depression, stress, heart disease, Alzheimer's, which is a brain disorder that affects the memory and the thinking ability, and of course, diabetes. My first point, avoid blue light. Kiki Eli, an expert on sleep, states how blue light can be extremely addictive and be incredibly stress-inducing. Blue light is the light that shines from your phone, your computer screens, and your TV. Now, how often do you find yourself doom scrolling on social media, or you find yourself studying immensely behind a computer screen? With this, you find yourself putting that down and going to bed, right? But those thoughts that you just saw from that blue light lingers in your mind, preventing you from sleeping soundly. Instead of that, have some alternatives. You could read before going to bed, listening to music, or meditate. Matthew Fuller's book on how to sleep states how meditation is a type of medication. How? Meditation is you relieving your body of the stress you felt throughout that day. It clears your mind and helps induce you to sleep more. Along with that, limit your screen time. You can just put away the phone. Make sure it is not accessible to you and your hands. Make sure you put it far away from that bed in order to get your sleep. Along with that, you can just go to your settings. It's just a click away. You can go to your settings and add a limit to those apps that are preventing you from sleeping. My next point is a little controversial, but you can utilize naps in order to sleep more. A study by T.L. Winston talks about how sleep can reduce fatigue, stress, insomnia, and can also help energy, daytime performance, and body healing. So, a study by L. Williams in 2017 talks about how he conducted a study with 2 groups. Both groups had associative memory training performed beforehand, and one group had a 90-minute nap after. The other did not nap. The group that performed better, a higher class performance, was the group that did the 90-minute nap. With that, set an alarm. Use alarm reminders. Make sure you get some rest today. Do 1 to 2 hours throughout the day, but make sure not to set a nap for right before bed, because then it might actually be counterproductive and prevent you from sleeping soundly. Now, I want to paint a picture for you. More sleep equals a better life. It can incredibly heal your body. T.N. Winston's handout on burnout and sleep talks about how you can increase your immune system by just sleeping. You can grow more white blood cells and fight those viruses and bacteria just by sleeping. You can lessen those headaches and those migraines that you may have throughout the day after a little night's rest throughout your class, and increase your alertness. Prevent accidents on the road, and of course, stay engaged in class, which I know your teachers and professors will be immensely grateful for. I want to emphasize again on how a lack of sleep is a danger on the road. Sarani's Sleep and Safety states how drowsy driving is just as dangerous as drunk driving. Once you lower your amount of sleep that night, your awareness on the road lessens as well. This can endanger yourself and others. You can swerve on the side of the road, hit a pedestrian, or you can have highway hypnosis, fall asleep behind the wheel. Many dangers can occur, so make sure you get enough sleep before that drive in order to keep yourself and others safe. In summary, avoid blue light. Make sure those temptations are far away from you. Make sure you don't get so absorbed in the blue light and those devices that you just can't sleep that night. Second, utilize naps. Do not abuse it. Make sure you get a nap and replenish your body and fuel it up for energy, because sleep is nourishment. Lastly, realize what a better life you would live if you just got more sleep. Now, take out your phones right there. I know they're there, I know you have them. Why? To make a limit for those apps and make sure that you schedule a nap today, because it is just a click away. With a better process, make sure you get the right amount of sleep for you tonight. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you to Lillian and all of our great speakers tonight. So in just a moment, we're going to take a break to tabulate the results. The judges have a tough task in front of them, as you can all see. I want to emphasize that everybody here is an excellent speaker. Everybody's going to be getting something tonight. So we have $150 each for all the runners up, and then the top speaker will receive that one-time scholarship of $300. So our top speaker tonight is taught by Professor Cassie Farron, Joseph Knowles. Being here. If all the speakers tonight could come see me real quick, that would be great. Thank you all for taking the time to be here.